I'm just going to pass it right back to you to talk about the priority and planning review.
Sounds good. Okay, hopefully all of you can see my screen. So I just wanted to say, I said this in chat, but thanks again for all of your feedback at the gathering. I believe it was in March or April where we talked about languages. So there's nothing I like more than being able to talk with all of you about something that we want to see for Aspen and then actually being able to show it to you when it's done. It's basically the best thing that we get to do here. So talking about what we did this past release. So I always like to review what our plan was and then kind of talk about how well we came, how we did on that plan. So our number one thing was to separate languages from grouped works, and you saw that. We've also been tackling lots and lots of high priority bugs. We've set an internal goal to, we let these get a little higher than we like. They're not super high at all, but we want to tackle 3 of them per week. And with that, we should be done in just a couple of releases and we should be totally caught up. So we're tackling about 3 high priority bugs or 12 high priority bugs a week. And then that gives us time to do about 1 of the top partner priorities per week. So about 4 a month. So one of the reasons we want to get through those high priority bugs is so that we can do more of the partner priorities. So that's kind of a way of saying the partner priorities are a little slow, but then as soon as we clear out that bug list, we'll be able to pick up on that quite a bit. The next thing on the list is the Library Evolve implementation. We got a little bit of work done on this, but we're still waiting for some API updates and some documentation, which was good in a way because that let us move on to our stretch goal for the Ebscohost integration. And you just saw the Ebscohost integration. This says working on it. It might flip to done before next week. And really, it's fully functional right now. We're just trying to decide whether or not we want to make some tweaks to how the facets work. One of the image databases doesn't return amazing results. You don't get thumbnails, and then the titles are very generic. So I'll be working with Mark on, just making sure that that's really patron friendly. And if it's not, that maybe we provide you with some options to turn some things off. But really, it's out there, and you'll be able to turn it on this release. So that one's pretty much done. Okay, so our plan for this upcoming release, again, you have what we just finished on the left. Upcoming is what's on the right. We're going to continue to tick off those high priority bugs and partner priorities. Finish the Ebscohost integration, like I just said. A big bulk of our work will be this new ILS integration, this Library Evolve implementation, as long as we get the documentation and the things that we need to complete that. So that will be a big chunk of our summer work, kind of depending on when those things come in. As far as LIDA goes, we are going to do one more thing to adjust how the browse categories work. And I want to thank the Nashville Public Library for this idea. With some of our libraries that have been really actively testing LIDA, the last page that is a little bit slower than we want to load is the Discover screen, which is where your browse categories come in. So we kind of went back and forth. Do we want to limit the browse categories that are on there? Do we want to show all of them? And through the conversations with library partners, we really decided that we do want to show all of them, just because to make sure the experience between the web version of Aspen and the app version of Aspen is the same, or has at least the same functionality. But then that kind of leaves us with a conundrum. We tried of how to make sure that it's performant, that it really loads quickly. We tried some things like lazy loading, where it just kind of loads them as you scroll up, but it just wasn't working for us. Nashville suggested that we can load a few, but then have a link to either show more or show all, and that a patron that is willing to click on that link, that wants to click on that link, is going to be a little bit more tolerant of waiting. So that's the idea that we're going to explore for LIDA in the next release. The next thing is our stretch goal for the next release for LIDA, and that's the start of notifications and system messages. When we talked to everyone at the end of 2021, early 2022, about what they really wanted to see for LIDA, that was a big deal. The notifications and system messages, it's an app, so it should have some features that come with an app to notify patrons of things like when your hold is available or when a title is coming due. There is another really high priority thing for LIDA that you don't see on here, and that's facets and filters. We do know that that's something we really need in LIDA. We'll be doing some design work and some patron usability testing before we actually dig into completing that work. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to show you some of that. Won't be done, but we'll be able to at least show you some mock-ups next at the next Aspen gathering. So that is our plan for that 22.07 release, and I will turn it back over to Morgan.
All right, couldn't find the button. Thank you. All right, that was great. So let's turn it over to Tara, who's going to do a recap of the last community meeting.
Everyone, if you aren't on the Aspen Community Slack, you might want to just sign up for that through the regular Aspen Slack. It's just the hashtag community channel. And last time we talked about collection accessibility and accessibility in general on Aspen, things like showing closed captioning, how Nashville shared how they've created an OPAC for a deaf and hard of hearing school. And then we also had some show and tells on additional OPACs in general for things like children's collections or new branches or archival collections. Nashville showed a really cool thing they're working on to display all the holdings of a local newspaper, articles from a local newspaper. And Kelly from McKinney showed their beautiful and lovely kids OPAC that's really cool and was featured recently in an Aspen Weekly, I believe, if you didn't see that. So yeah, we'll have our next meeting. Oh gosh, I should have looked at my calendar when that's when that's coming up. I think it's in 2 months, in July, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll post the agenda in our Slack channel for anyone to add to and contribute as you like.
Awesome. Thanks, Tara. Yeah, definitely recommend joining the community group if you're not already a part of it. I think pretty much everyone here knows about it, at the very least. So yeah, consider joining if you haven't already. And next on our agenda, unless anyone has any questions about what Tara said or joining the community meeting, so you can just put that in the chat. Oh, yep. And Cal put the next community meeting date in the chat, which is July 21st. So thank you, Cal. I'm going to pass it over to Elise now, who's going to talk about upcoming conferences and summits.
Hello, everybody. So upcoming conferences and summits. Actually, right now, as we speak, one of our Bywater team members is at the New Jersey Library Association conference. And then in a few weeks, we are super excited about the ALA conference, yay, in DC from June 24th to 27th. We will be at booth 3422. I'll post a link in the chat just for a little article about that. If any of y'all are going, please let us know. We would love to see you. You can put in the chat if you're going or if any of your colleagues are planning on going. We will be doing some presentations in the booth on Aspen. We'll be doing an Aspen integration with LibCal, why Aspen is right for your library. And I believe that's being guest presented with somebody from Boynton Beach, which will be really exciting. And then in July, we have the American Association of Law Libraries Conference from July 16th to 19th. And then the Louisiana Library Association Conference from July 7th to 9th. And we will also be at the Cephalin Regional Conference, July 26th. So that'll be fun to see some of our Florida peeps there. So again, it's just been exciting to be back on the conference circuit. And if you're planning on attending any of those, let us know. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Louise. All right, so let's just keep it on going. I'm going to pass it back to Jordan for a discussion about relevancy and hoopla.
Yeah, so this is something that came up with one of our libraries recently, that they have a large hoopla collection, and they were starting to notice that with certain searches, their results were starting to be mostly hoopla. And there were a couple different issues with this. So it seemed like, you know, do we want to mitigate this? Is this a problem with something that we bring to the community to just talk about maybe options here? And this is really, it says kind of part one in the title here. We really just wanted to introduce the conversation because it's not the kind of thing that I think you might want to go back and have conversations with your with other people at the library, do some test searches in your catalog. So we're really just introducing the concept here, but we can also open it up to questions or additional thoughts. But expect to have us continue the conversation at another gathering as well. So there were really two potential issues that we saw here, not so much that well, a little bit the quantity of content. So depending on the library's local collection and what physical materials they have on a particular topic, especially if they don't collect a lot of those physical materials, the e-content results really dominated. So some libraries feel like it kind of plays down their physical collection, and they want to look like, yeah, we do have a robust collection. We do have a lot of books. It's not just e-content here, especially for those patrons that are still, we still have the ones that say, I love the books. Like, I want to smell the books. You can't smell the ebooks. The second issue, and this is one that I think is maybe different, also very important, the quality of the content. So with the big e-content providers like Hoopla and Canopy, some of the titles our librarians have been finding might not be up to par with the library's collection development policy. So it might include ideas that if they were in a physical book, the library would say, no, we don't want that book. We don't want to, I don't want to say promote that in our library, but it's not something that is in line with our collection development policy. So where those two kind of potential issues collide, we don't collect a lot of physical materials on this, and that topic is kind of questionable. That's where one of our libraries is really wanting to see if there's anything that Aspen might do. And I want to say that specifically, is there anything that Aspen should do? Because there's other ways that this could be mitigated. It's not necessarily Aspen. We've talked a little bit about collection development, but with collections this large for thousands and tens of thousands of materials, it's really, you can't really, nobody has the labor to do collection development for a collection that large. I also wanted to mention the benefits of including this content. Our physical buildings are limited, right? We know that shelf space is limited. And these large collections, especially when they contain like some older titles, or some very specific titles where you just don't have space, they're really nice for that too. So this is really a pro-con situation. And there's different ways that we can handle it. So it's really, is the way that this is set up with Aspen now, is that having an impact on your patrons, a negative impact on your patrons? And can we kind of say what that is? And if so, is changing how we do things, is that trade-off? Do you think that might be worth it? So I'm just going to, again, we're just kind of introducing the discussion right now. And I just kind of want to open up the floor for additional comments on this, on things that people have seen or questions that we should consider.
If I may?
Yes, please.
So we found out when we contacted Hoopla that we would be able to suppress things from showing on the Hoopla digital website, like some of the Holocaust denial things, but I'm pretty sure that is still would just be imported straight into our Aspen. So if we'd be able to go in and say, we've identified these titles, which we definitely do not want to promote in our catalog on an individual level for us, that'd be very helpful.
Okay, and there's two ways we could do that too, because we could either do that on the Aspen side, or really, if you're suppressing it on the Hoopla side, the API should be or the API, I'm going to say should, I don't know whether it already does or not. I'm looking at Mark to see if he knows.
My understanding is that if you have suppressed it in Hoopla, the APIs should also suppress it.
Thank you. I'll check and then report back.
Okay.
I will speak from Swan's experience. We have had this problem and maybe brought that second question to you a while back. But that has been our experience, that if you do suppress it on the Hoopla side, it will no longer show up in the catalog.
Yeah, it looks like Erin is in Shield in the chat is also saying the same thing, that they have suppressed a lot of titles in Hoopla and it doesn't show up in Aspen. So it's good to hear some confirmation, but yeah, definitely double check for your library if you're doing that.
Yes, maybe jump in just with a suggestion. I wonder if there's maybe something to do instead of, in terms of like kind of the quantity of content problem, if there might be something to do with, just sort of like the availability tabs, kind of break for certain libraries, maybe breaking that up into digital versus physical collections. Like I don't think it's something like personally for our consortium we would ever do, but we have huge collections because there's so many libraries. But certainly for some of our smaller libraries, if they're limiting down to their like an individual collections, that can happen if they're not doing a ton of purchasing. So yeah, I'd be more inclined to like look at filters versus including collections.
And Tara, are you thinking of making, and I want to give everybody time to think and ask questions, but are you thinking of a filter that would be easy to apply or a filter that would kind of be pre-applied?
I suppose, again, maybe I'm not the best person to speak to this, but I suppose it depends on the library's preference. If they wanted something, pre-applied for their physical collections that was then easy to expand, I could see that sort of meeting a certain need. Yeah.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Okay, we will probably ask about this again. So go back, talk to your librarians that work very closely with the public, talk to your other colleagues, and let us know what other people think, or just kind of take it away and chew on it for a while. So that's our discussion topic for today, or the beginning of one.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, and if anyone has a thought pop into their head at any time, you can put it in the chat. Or, you can even reach out to us in a ticket if you have anything that you wanted to say, just as it comes up. Or we can talk about it at next month's meeting. So either way. I have on the agenda to discuss any best practices for managing Aspen in a consortium. And I know several of you who are in here have left really great comments on Slack already, because I did post that in the Slack channel. So this is just a reminder, if you wanted to contribute to that, that question should be in the general Slack channel if you want to contribute. But basically, we're working on an Aspen Weekly topic just to help new and maybe even existing library partners who are in a consortia situation, just different ideas for managing Aspen between multiple users, like how you've done it, what did you find worked well or not so well. So if you have any ideas, even if you're not in a consortia, like if you just have ideas for managing between multiple types of users, or libraries, we would love to hear your ideas. So does anyone have any thoughts or best practices or tips that they want to talk about or share? Maybe not.
Is there a specific area? We're a big consortium. We have a lot. We definitely have a lot of strategies for handling it, but is there, so I don't want to take over, but I'm happy to talk about any specific areas.
Yeah. I guess what we were trying to do, or my original thought, was how to prepare people implementing Aspen. Because you're learning a new discovery layer, you're learning this whole new system. Some people are trying to learn a new ILS and Aspen at the same time. So I guess if there were some ready-made tips, here are some ideas for how you might think of managing this. Whether that's I know some people have built out Google Forms and allow their libraries to submit requests for customizations on their library's catalog, or requests for new permissions for a user. So just things like that, things that have made your lives easier as far as getting multiple people involved in Aspen.
Aaron's plugging the Aspen Weekly he wrote up, which is definitely good for like if you're a new consortium, like rolling it out.
Yeah.
In terms of like things that have made our lives easier, I think that probably the big one was just doing things for people. So setting it, I would like our recommendation, I think, would be to just from the consortia side, we just try to set up defaults where if you never want to touch your Aspen catalog configuration, you never have to. And there are libraries in our system that never have. So we added everyone's logo, set up, just like a baseline theme for them, some browse categories that were just kind of generic, like, new fiction and movies and all that kind of thing. And then that way, if they just wanted to get on their catalog and use it with their patrons and call it a day, then they could do that, and it sort of lets people kind of dig in as much or as little as they want. So I think that would be our biggest tip for making your lives easier, probably. And then we have kind of some like standard, we just have like 4 standard roles. So we don't allow a lot of customization to permissions. We say just use these roles, and that sort of makes it easier to, so we're not like individually managing like a whole bunch of roles or permissions or accounts for folks.
Okay. Yeah, that is really great advice because we have kind of kicked around, we keep going back to it, the idea of like, what is the minimum amount of configuration that we offer? Like, we get in these situations with consortia who may not have the people resources, that there aren't people employed just at a consortia level. It's like different library directors are shouldering these extra Aspen responsibilities. And so trying to help them like figure it all out when they still have a library to run and they have to figure out Aspen. So yeah, being able to offer like, this is what it can look like if you just don't have the time, you just want a catalog, you're just happy to be on Aspen instead of whatever it was before. So yeah, I guess if I don't know, we have ideas for what could be the minimum requirements. So if anyone has any ideas for like what you offer to those types of libraries where you're doing it for them. And maybe that's just something that can vary from consortia to consortia too. But
I'll say this in terms of with Swan, and Tara can really refute or support this, which is I think we've really had to manage folks' expectations that because this is an open source solution, that every idea that is shared is one that will be executed on or is a good idea. And the fact that this community has been growing, while great, it does, for me at least at times, I'm curious about configuration bloat for Aspen. I'll just say it, that there's times where I think that we can't let some of our own internal battles with our libraries always be resolved with the software. There are times where I think the community is going to have to come to some consensus around drawing a line in the sand about some things are just going to have to be ensuring that your bibliographic database has to meet certain standards. If you can't get it to meet those standards, please don't try to force Aspen to fix everything that maybe you should be responsible for. So that said, these huge metadata, kind of databases coming from our third-party vendors is going to be, I think, a long problem for this community. Just the fact that it can connect everything in there, I think we'll be battling that for a while. And so, at least centrally at Swan, we have definitely seen the impact it has centrally with our staff. Grouping records, has become a big part of my central cataloging group. They never used to have to do that. Now they're contending on two fronts: metadata in Aspen, metadata at the bibliographic level within the ILS. So those are my comments on that. I don't know, Tara, if those reflect what you want to hear as a leader of the community.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly kind of been like the two sides of it, is just like the training and configuration. And then the other side of it sort of, I think are, we kind of have, just in terms of like support ticket count, it's kind of evenly split between just how do I do this thing in Aspen? Why is the search not functioning the way I expect it, like kind of not understanding how facets work and that kind of thing. And then the other half of it is just, kind of managing the bibliographic data and grouping, and, why Hoopla doesn't group, and, kind of figuring out all these weird challenges, I think, in our data that were already there. They existed. It's probably on us, but, the Aspen sort of maybe surfaces in ways that the catalog didn't before. And I think this is just maybe a thing with any new system. You kind of you roll out a new system, it just gets everyone's eyeballs on things. Like we have all these weird questions about holds that have really nothing to do with Aspen. It's just misconceptions with how our ILS works that people are just kind of paying closer attention now. Like they're like, wait, how is Aspen handling these holds? How is it changing it? And it's like, it's not, it's just your eyes are kind of like glued on things that you didn't look at before.
There was a history of Swan that I had to put together. It was on some specific anniversary date, with the consortium having started in the early 70s. And in looking over all this documentation and sort of the history of the group, it would follow the same pattern. There was a migration to this new platform, and then the months later, it was a bibliographic data cleanup ensued. And it would always follow that same pattern. Every new public catalog exposes your data in different ways. So there's always just something along those lines to just plan for within that project, especially if you have a large bibliographic data set. So I think that's something any large library system or that has a large database is just going to have to contend with that. I'm watching the chat.
Yeah, it looks like people are appreciating the comments and discussion. I think these are great comments, because I think whenever we have a new library partner who is just starting out with the process, some people just straight off the bat are like, what can we do to prepare our data? Like, what do we need to do? And it's just so different. Like even between the same ILS, you could have different kind of situations going on. And it's almost like we don't really know what we need to do until we see it in Aspen. And that's the great thing about Aspen, is that, it's agnostic for the different systems, but I think that's going back to the settings. It's why we have to have so many settings, but I think, and maybe Mark can speak more about this philosophy, but it's like, I could see him smiling when you said at some point you have to draw a line in the sand.
That's just for a wider community kind of thing to grapple with. It's at some point. I think it just needs to be said. I always use the example from way back. I think when I was working with Evanced when it was sort of its own sort of company, and I watched a very responsive company with developers do more and more and more and more with that administrative function, to the point where it was unusable. And I would never want to see that replicated here. So I don't know what that means and when what's happening.
Yeah, and certainly we do have lots of configuration because everybody's different, which is fun and cool. But I could see us having more and more like, here are sets of best practices. So if you are on Polaris, you should configure things this way. And if you are on Symfony, you should do things this way, and more like make it easier to copy sets of settings and that kind of thing.
I think also make
Wherever
sure
we
that
can streamline and make sure we're not adding one if we don't have to, that's good too. So.
prepare in advance that you are going to be having to deal with bibliographic data, and make sure that you may not know what is the bibliographic data you're going to clean up, just know that it's going to happen. So if, for example, you have the ability to take some aspect of your system and make mass changes in a way that would help speed that along, probably start thinking about that you've got staff or training or tools to be able to do that. An example could be Symfony now has data control. If that's something that you haven't considered yet, it's definitely worth looking at. Swan's been fortunate, and we've had a lot of staff trained in Symfony API. So we do have staff with a lot of expertise at the command line to do that sort of work.
I think the big areas that we see a lot of differences are how you determine format, how you determine audience, and how you determine if it's fiction or nonfiction. And there's just a bunch of different ways people do that. So, and then depending on how much you're looking into it, it's, well, how do we describe these CD plus book and book plus CD? And is there a difference? And there should there be a difference, and all of those things. And some of that just depends a lot on the library and how much you want to get down to it. And libraries catalog so differently too, because it might be separate bibs for the book and the large print, or just separate item types, or maybe it's just they all go on one thing and they're all books and we don't care. So it's fun from our side to see all of those things too. So.
Also say if the issue is content coming in from a third-party provider, something like Hoopla, and we know that the Hoopla records don't always group the best, that's something that you as a community can definitely put together an effort and go to Hoopla. Because we can do what we can on our side to kind of mitigate the patterns that we can identify. But you're the ones, paying them for their content. So working with them to get better content also will help and make Aspen better.
We definitely do have vendors that we talk to regularly that are like, yeah, help us help you. So attack it from both ways.
Yeah.
I would say, important consortium wise too, is talking to your libraries and seeing just how they want it to come across, because there's been a lot of confusion with our libraries. We have so many different types of libraries, so many different weird interconnected things that, do you want one library system with 2 locations for your branches, or do you want 2 library systems so each of those can have their own themes and have their own everything basically? And that's always a conversation that I have whenever we're adding another library on is what exactly do you want this to look like? And then, sometimes it's like, oh, you're not connected to the public library, you're a school, but you actually want all of their items to be showing in your discovery layer, even though you're not actually the same library system in Koha. And so, that's always an interesting project. So, but talking to them and just making sure, like, how exactly do you want this to look to your patrons? Do you want it to be seamless, almost seamless going between these branches? So yeah,
I'll say this, I think also the catalog that you're like leaving behind also influences quite a bit of what you're kind of looking to do within your Aspen plan. So, and this isn't to minimize the amount of work that Swan and under Tara managing this project had to do, but I do think that when Swan was leaving a single catalog instance and we moved over to enterprise where we basically had 100 plus, and Tara can tell you it was way more than 100 because we had profiles for library use inside their buildings, which were different from the external profile, that to some degree, having already completed that transition, moving to this sort of Aspen approach of also having different looks for each library wasn't as daunting as I could imagine it would be if you were coming off of like a single Encore, catalog, and then having to go to this idea of having multiple instances with different e-content feeds in there. So
Good comments. Yeah, that's always, I think some people jump into the project and sometimes we get, there's a good central team who are like, all right, we're ready. Just tell us what we need to do and figure out. And some people are like, not quite sure. And so they're looking to us for more guidance, which is what we're here for too. But yeah, when there's no one chomping at the bit to do it for everyone or help everyone out, it can be a little challenging. So yeah, it might be one of those things that is part of the project planning aspects of implementation. Just, make people aware of like this, these are the kinds of things that you should think about and you might have to make decisions on, whether that's deciding to make decisions for everyone or deciding to have everyone make their own decisions for their own catalogs. So cool. These have been some really good thoughts. If you have any other ideas or input that you think of, even if you're not at a consortium, just like what helped you during implementation or what helps you now, you can drop that in the Slack channel. It should still be relatively right there in the general tab. You might have to scroll up just a tiny little bit. But yeah, this has been such great feedback and it'll be really good help in writing this article. So thank you all. I think now we can go into open time if anyone has anything they want to ask about or discuss while we have 10 minutes left.
So what I will say is, and actually sort of an extension of what we were just talking about, which is as the sole person to do Aspen for our consortium, is I so often wish that I had a Control F on the admin side, because there are so many settings, and that is awesome because so we're sort of kind of the opposite of Swan, where basically all of our libraries get to have their own little playground, and I have to figure out how to support all those different needs. So it's awesome that they're all there, but I have such trouble remembering where they are. That it's like, it's not so much that I'm wanting to do a Control F on values I've set, but more so that I'm trying to do a Control F to find the section buried somewhere in the admin area where you control those settings. Instead, I have to click through. I think maybe it's in here, and I click through and I look, and then, there's all these accordions in there. So I have to go through and expand accordions because maybe it's hidden in one of those. And I just spend so much time trying to find things because we're all so different that I'm having to do random things that are totally different from one another, from moment to moment.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. I think it is kind of a wish list thing to be able to one day search the settings and perhaps even, I think we've discussed it internally or maybe even at a previous gathering of somehow having, instead of all the settings all the time, depending on your ILS, like, yeah, there's going to be a lot of overlap, but there's probably some things that, okay, well, if it doesn't work for your library, then you don't need to see that specific setting or set of settings. So that might help a little bit, but I think one day the goal is to have it a little more searchable.
And I know we're working on new help center, which will help some. So that'll definitely make it easier to at least figure out where to go, hopefully. So
Yeah,
stay
we did
tuned.
preview a help center late last year, and then things got so busy. But we have really just hit the ground running, and Cal has helped tremendously. So we have set our goal to be able to talk about that at the next gathering and give you kind of the first look of the new help center, which is going to be focused more on goals and tasks, like things that you want to do, versus here's a list of all the settings and you have to click on each one to see what they are, which that's helpful in a different way. But this is more like, how do I remove a browse category from the front page? How do I find my PayPal credentials? How do I, so it's kind of like that. And we're really, really, really excited for it.
Yeah,
And
one
that
of the
will be
things,
searchable.
okay. And so I don't know how this plays into it right now. I mean, one of the tools that I try to use is aspen.bywater. Whatever the ending is, and do a search there, but I get back so many release notes, right? And maybe that can help sometimes, but most of the time it doesn't, because I know that I can do X. I'm trying to find contextually where I do that in Aspen admin. So, I'm really looking for the documentation on that thing. And I have to wade through all these different release notes because some of these things get touched almost every release.
Yeah. So this is separate from that aspen.bywatersolution.com site. Basically, we're using Aspen to build this help center. So it's its own instance of Aspen. And all the documentation is on web builder pages. So all of that will be completely full text searchable. And I think our hope is to also get Aspen Weekly on there as well. So you'll be able to do a full text search of the Aspen Weekly PDFs. So lots of exciting things. We'll hopefully make it easier to find what you're looking for and not have to wade through a bunch of release notes. Yeah. But thank you for bringing that up, because that's a good insight. Let's see what's going on in the chat. This might just be between Amanda and Brian. Or is that a question? Are you sideloading book club kits? Oh, just a general question.
Yeah, just for the chat.
Okay, yeah. I think, is this in reference to didn't you post in the Slack channel about this?
My mini essay, yes, but
Yeah. I don't know how that works, since you said that there's a mix of items on the same record, correct?
yeah, but yeah, what I'm interested in here is just like hearing quick consensus what other people are doing with book club kits, if they're side loaded or not.
So I can speak to that. So we put book club kits on a separate bib record because the details of the bib record say how many there are of the book in the kit. Sometimes there is like a question or like a discussion pamphlet, like discussion questions for the book. So there may be augmented material that is in that kit that wouldn't be with the regular book. So they do go on separate records. We do side load them. And the main reason we side load them is that we use Kit Keeper, which is a third-party service that's really good for people making plans for, like, I have a book club meeting starting on August 1st. So I need to have this particular kit starting August 1st. And by side loading them, we can really change, we can customize how that appears in the catalog so that it's clear you need to go someplace else, and that don't try to place a hold on this, even though those records also happen to be in our ILS. Don't try to place a hold. via the catalog in the ILS on these items, you need to go someplace else.
Okay, looks like there's some good responses in the chat, and of course what Chanel just said too. And of course, if you have more thoughts about that or want to share how you handle book club kits, make sure to check out Amanda's post on the Slack channel. But yeah, I think keeping them, I mean, I can't say what to do, but I always tend towards recommending people sideload them if you want to link them out to an external site, because that way it makes it really obvious to the patron that they can't place a hold on it, and then the button, it just takes them out straight to the registration link. They don't have to click inside the record and then, you know, click on the links section in the record display. So that's personally what I like, but I'm not a cataloger. All right. Well, I think this has been another awesome Aspen gathering. A lot of good discussion today.